Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our SNATS Chat. This is our rescheduled fall semester SNATS Chat. We had some technical difficulties at our original date, but we're so excited that we were able to bring our guest back this evening, Warren Freeman. I'm going to give a more proper introduction of him in a moment. But I just wanted to introduce myself first. My name's Errik Hood. I'm on the faculty of NYU Steinhardt. I've been hosting these SNATS Chats for a few years now. And the SNATS Chats were built with the idea, capitalizing on the success of the NATS Chats, where they're exploring and illuminating and clarifying ideas and complex principles and discussing it with the leaders in our field. And we looked at that model and we thought, what an incredible resource. What if those ideas and that format was used to address concerns of current college students and early career voice teachers? And so that's the market we're looking at, talking directly to with these SNATS Chats. So we're so glad you found us. You may have noticed that we've pivoted to Zoom webinar from GoToMeeting. That's partly because we're looking to find more and more immersive and interactive experiences. You know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are all spending a lot more time in front of screens. We're doing a lot more remote and virtual learning. And it's an incredible resource, but we're looking for ways to make this experience a little different than what you're getting in other places. So Zoom Webinar allows us to promote attendees to panelists. They can turn on their video and they can interact with hosts and the guests and create an experience where we're really helping address issues and concerns and questions of our live attendees. And then our folks who are watching later after the fact in the archive videos can also learn from those questions and experiences. So really excited about pivoting to Zoom webinar and looking for a more interactive experience here. Before we begin, before I introduce our host, our guest rather, I just want to thank NATS and all the folks in the national office and all of the national officers who help oversee and support and promote these chats. We're so grateful to NATS for all their support. Without them, without the hard work of the folks in the national office, we wouldn't be able to bring these events to you in this virtual world. So thank you to NATS, and thank you to everyone for being here, and thank you especially to our special guest Warren Freeman, my friend and colleague here at NYU Steinhardt. A little brief bio for Warren. He's played leading roles on the stages in every major city across the United States and Canada, including an extensive career in New York City as a singer, cabaret performer, voiceover artist. National tours include Cats, Sound of Music, and My Fair Lady. Also, as a music director and vocal coach, he's created arrangements for Broadway stars, Tony Award nominees, New York cabaret artists. In 2014, he earned his master's in contemporary vocal pedagogy from Shenandoah Conservatory, now teaches voice at NYU and at Temple University in Philadelphia. Warren, thank you so much for being here. So excited to have you.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic introduction. I forgot I did all those things. Some of them I might have lied about too. Maybe I'm stretching.
Exactly. No. Most of them are true. No, they're all true and so much more. Warren, what I love about you and our work together, you know, we teach at NYU together. We've done summer intensives at NYU together. And what I love is just how multifaceted you are as a musician, as a singer, as a teacher. And it's that multifacetedness that diversity of experience and knowledge base. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about this topic. And I know you're going to address that a little bit later when you start talking to us about this topic. So excited to have you because of your demeanor, because of your knowledge, but also the diversity of experience and expertise you have. So thanks so much for being here. I'm going to hand it over to you because I know you've got some information to share, and we can talk a little bit how the rest of the evening will go.
That's fantastic. I need to hire you to be my brand manager. I'm getting my doctorate currently at Shenandoah, and I'm taking a class in branding and fixing my website. So for those of you who visit my website after tonight, I apologize in advance. I haven't looked at it in a long time. What I have been busy doing is at NYU, starting right when we went into remote, I was asked to create a class that kind of dealt with the challenges of home singing, home recording, home lessons. And so kind of in collaboration with the faculty and the students, asking them, what do you need? How can we help you through this time? And at the beginning, of course, as you know, we're all just like, how do this thing cannot make noise come out? And now it's like, well, almost all Broadway auditions have transitioned to virtual for the open calls. People are being asked to submit videos. Everyone's so versed in the technology that major performance opportunities are happening virtually, pre-recorded. So I think it's just really important for us as voice teachers and as singers to understand what's out there for our use. I think what I realized, a lot of my students thought there was a huge barrier of entry to a lot of these technologies. And so I'm not an expert in technology. I don't teach performing, I'm not like a recording artist. Uh, I don't do, what is the music performing arts? I can't remember exactly what they call it, recording technology. But I have come at this from my years of just tinkering around with things and Googling things when I have questions and trying to use technology to the best of my advantage. So I'm sure a lot of you out there will say, oh, I know that already, I've got this. But there might be people who are like, I had no idea I could use free tools, the computer I already have, the phone I already have, to do the kind of things that really will set you apart from other recordings that you see out there, really helping giving your students the tools to succeed in a world that's going to be increasingly virtual, as we know.
Yeah,
That
Warren,
being said, go ahead.
Warren, I
Yeah.
was just going to interrupt. I was just going to say thank you. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited. You don't have to be an expert in this in order to create really effective recordings. And it's not just these performing opportunities that are transitioning to utilizing home recordings as a part of the process, but also a lot of you in college right now are thinking about professional voice teacher, looking at careers in higher education, especially if you're in graduate school. You're going to have to prepare singing excerpts, teaching excerpts, and a lot of us don't have access to a professional recording engineer, and we need to make really high quality videos. So, so excited you're sharing with us. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you can take this as far down the rabbit hole as you like, or you can keep it at the completely basic level. And we'll start pretty basic today, too. For those of you who filled out that survey already, I've got kind of some of the general results here. It looks like we've got like 2/3 of you are interested in accompaniment tracks, microphones, recording, balancing vocals. Fewer people are interested in a video recording setup, so I'll probably tackle that last today, time permitting. And then there's some other people who indicated they have specific questions about their setup. And when we get to each of those points in my presentation that I've kind of prepared, I'll do some demos, I'll do some PowerPoint. We'll try and bring you in so we can say like, hey, do you have something you want to show off, or what's going on? Maybe we can kind of help you through it together, or at least help you find some resources based on what you have available to you in your studio. I'm not looking to tell everyone to go out and buy $1,000 microphones to make this work today. So hopefully with the kind of stuff, and I'll show off my gear in just a second, you'll be able to do this. Let's start with accompaniment tracks, because those, even my students just are bewildered on how to make their accompaniment tracks work for themselves. And the ones that have kind of really taken upon themselves to integrate this information into our lessons, it's just a thrill and a joy when they come in and they're like, oh, I already have my 16 bar cut for this. Great, let's do it, let's hear it. And then they just become so much more, they have so much more autonomy over what's happening when they sing, as opposed to being at the whim of this. So let me just start at the very beginning. Share my screen, let's do that. And this is, I have so many more slides than we need. I'll be able to go into a ton of depth or skim the surface, so I'll keep an eye on the chat as well. If there are people who have burning questions they want to ask, I'll just kind of keep an eye out for that, and Errik will do so as well. I mean, let's just be honest. Where do we get our accompaniment tracks from? These are some of the things, of course, that I've crowdsourced from my students. YouTube, I think, is probably the #1 thing that people will say to me. They just play the track off of YouTube. Purchasing the track is always a great option. Purchasing it from Amazon Music or another streaming site. Access to those streaming sites. Sometimes we don't have access to a vocal-free track. I'm going to show you some steps to get around that today. If you're not familiar with some of the technology we can use to remove the vocals from pre-existing tracks. Accompanist is really popular. I don't personally use it because I play the piano well enough if something needs to be played at a moment's notice. I like the interface of it. I think it's really cool. I think it has some drawbacks because it's only the things that you find on that app. But if anyone is an expert on app accompanist, I'm glad to hear from you today, kind of convert me to being an app accompanist. Getting your accompanist to record things for you. We'll talk kind of about what to ask for from your accompanist if you do have one like we do here at NYU, or if you have a friend you want to pay. Self-accompanying is something that you singer-songwriters have to deal with all the time. So that's what I think about when we're teaching our contemporary students. We're like, hey, I'm gonna play the guitar on this track. Great, let's start thinking about how that's going to work for you over a virtual. And then play score 2, I just put this here to remind myself, those of you who don't know this, I'm going to do like the quickest demo on it when we get through this section, because it is a tool that's available to you that actually reads sheet music pretty well from a PDF and turns it into several different sources you can use. I always recommend, if you can buy a track, if you can pay someone to make one for you, we're all artists here, we deserve to get paid. It has happened before though that you know, you need it in that lesson right now. You have an audition tomorrow. So there are several steps that you can use to get tracks available to you. Just with a caveat before I even go on, just consider, how are you sharing this song? That we're not looking, I don't want to break any copyright laws. If you share things on YouTube, if you're trying to promote yourself or trying to monetize, even worse, then you're gonna get knocked for that. So I'm not encouraging anybody to steal anything, for sure. These are educational purposes that we can use these. Just pay people for the work that they create. But what I do is I use ytmp3.cc. I bet a lot of you are familiar with it, for how to rip a YouTube video directly to an MP3. The interface is not the best, and it looks like you're gonna get a virus. So you just copy the URL and only click on the button. I'll show you what I do to make sure nothing else pops up. Don't click any of this suspicious stuff. If that track has vocals already, I go to, my favorite now is x-.pro. And that can actually remove, using artificial intelligence, the vocal from that track. And it's pretty good. If it's something that you want to work on in a voice lesson, if it's something that you need to quickly get down for an audition, this will work. I would not probably recommend recording a full album using vocal removed, but you could absolutely do that. And then we'll talk a little bit about audio formats in just a second. Let me do like the quickest version of ripping a song from YouTube in a way that maybe I was actually surprised how well it works. So I'm going to go to my YouTube. I'm doing that right now, so you can't see all the fun like video game YouTube channels and cooking channels that I subscribe to, because I'm a giant nerd.
And while Warren's doing that, I'm just going to do one more reminder that we're not using these tracks for any performance, for any recordings that we're going to upload anywhere or utilize. These are just for in the studio, so that we have something in the moment that's effective and useful when we maybe don't have the skills to play it ourselves, or we don't have access to a recorded track for a virtual lesson. These are tools for the lessons, not something we're uploading, sharing, selling, monetizing. So
exactly,
just one more time to say that. Yeah,
I think it's worth repeating, because that does get confusing. Great. So here is, I had a student who really wanted to work on A Stranger from Giant, beautiful Michael John LaChiusa song, and was not able to find a suitable accompaniment. Here is the cast recording of Giant, but then I was like, oh, here's Kate singing it at 54 below. She's fantastic. Let me listen to the quality of this. And the piano's pretty clean. I thought, oh, that's really nice. Let's copy this link. And then we go to ytmp3.cc. ytmp3.cc. And then it looks like this. Those of you who have seen this know what's going on, but I'm just showing you to show you what not to click on. So you paste it into the box, and I have a pop-up blocker on. I've got also some other antivirus software on here, content blocker, so it does not have any of these other weird pop-ups that happen. You only just click this download MP3 that shows up. This is a little wonky. I don't recommend using this. This is kind of like last resort for me, or like Errik said, kind of in the moment. But as you can see, like the download speed is very weird. I'm not sure who's getting my information. So I just want you to know that this is out there. I'm trying to show you how to stay safe while you're downloading. Here is then what I go to next is vocal remover. Oh no, actually I'll use x--pro. And you click on karaoke tracks, remove vocals from a song. This might make me sign in. We did this earlier today, and it's maybe angry at me. Well, let's try doing this, see what happens. Once you already do tracks, there we go. Okay, it's letting me do this now. So this is gonna allow me to just drag that MP3 directly here. I'm gonna change this to instruments and vocals, and I'll tell you why that is in just a minute. But this is gonna actually take that. I'm gonna just drop this directly from my downloads. And this will give you a version of the track at the top that has piano only. And then the bottom one, it will have Kate's vocals isolated, which I think is really useful in the voice studio as well. Sometimes you can remove some extra information, some extra processing. If I'm trying to analyze a singer and say like, I'm not sure how they do this, having that other information take away, I can say like, oh, you know what? I think that is it's a different kind of mix than I thought it was. So I think it's just really useful that this tool is available to us to isolate vocals as well. So here is our piano track. Let's click forward and listen to it. Kate doesn't start singing yet. Here's where she comes in. You can see her vocal here. Is it 100% clean? No. If I needed to use this in a lesson, absolutely I wouldn't hear that voice in the background. I'd be like, cool, whatever. Let's listen to just the isolated vocal.
When you're a stranger in a strange new place, you learn how much you...
So is there still piano artifact in there? Yeah. But this would be a great way to really turn up the volume on a lead vocal performance to say like, oh, this rock singer is doing something really interesting, and be able to kind of listen to what if that is technique, what if it is production. So I'm gonna go ahead and download both of these. When pop-ups happen, I just close them. Download music and download vocals. So that is one way to quick and dirty get an accompaniment track that you would need in an emergency. Let me briefly show you what I use probably more often when I don't have the time to play something in. And that would be Play Score. I was trying to do iPhone screen sharing earlier today, but it didn't quite work. But I'll just show you here. It's this little Play Score app right next to Bandlab. Tap on Play Score. The interface is wonky, but you can upload PDFs directly. I use AirDrop to do this, and I tell my phone to answer the AirDrop in Play Score. So let me show you how to do that. I'm gonna do, I've got a sheet music of a stranger in this key, and I'm gonna just bring that up, and I'm gonna send it to myself using AirDrop. Those of you who you could easily send this in a message, but I like using AirDrop for it. And I'm gonna send it to myself. And then it says AirDrop. How do you want to answer this? And I say I'm just gonna answer it right away with Play Score 2. So you tap Play Score 2. It gives me the sheet music. If for whatever reason I need to reorder the pages, let's say the PDF was out of order, I could do that here. You hit done. And now that little blue bar means it's trying to figure out how to play this as if it were a human being. Let's hit play and see what happens. Very slow. Tempo slider is at the bottom here. Let's move this up so it feels like it's in cut time. I mean, it's pretty accurate. Sometimes it gets confused with certain things, and there are troubleshooting guides that you can use to find this out. The one thing that I find is really useful to do is if you tap at the bottom left here, you can actually choose how loud the top line of the staff is based on the bottom two lines of the staff. So I'm actually going to use this slider to pull the vocals completely out, and then we'll hit play on that one. So now, and you can tap anywhere on the score, and it's going to start from that place you tapped. So now the vocal line is gone. So if sometimes we'll even do this, and I'm like, oh, I'm in the middle of a class right now, I can't get this accompaniment to you. I'll see if I can upload it quickly to Play Score, have that generate an accompaniment. It has its own problems, but we'll talk about that as we get to moving this into a program that can use it. Any questions so far about places to find accompaniments? If you want to throw things into the panelist chat or other things, great places that you have used to find accompaniments really quickly when you need them, or you have a student who's really struggling to get ideas for songs. I'm going to keep moving. If you have other comments about that. Now we're going to kind of move into how do you, with the accompaniments that have been played for you, or that you found, or that you've recorded yourself, how do we really create custom versions of them? How many of us have, of course, been singing through a piece and you're like, I just need 2 more seconds for a breath in this phrase. Can we just give me 2 more seconds? But it's been recorded that way. So you change your entire vocal performance to match something that was recorded without you in mind. Really tricky. So let me just show you kind of the easiest ways to do that on free software. The software I use, I'm a Mac user. Sorry, I was a convert. My dad bought like the first Mac in 1984, and so it was the only computer I've ever had. So I apologize to my PC users. I'll show you a version, but I'm so Mac centric at this point. It's hard to get me off. I'm addicted to it. So if we talk about playing back your live tracks, MP3s are usually fine for a voice lesson. I don't think you really need any better. If you were doing a recording from it, you probably want to get a higher quality file. Usually look for a WAV file. I like to play these for my students to find an app on their phone that doesn't autoplay instead of playing directly from their music app. Usually I'll go into Google Drive, and you can actually set up your Google Drive so it downloads the song, so you don't have that like awkward, your student is trying to download the YouTube video and their internet connection just went out, because of course they're also streaming your Zoom video at the same time. So have them download their tracks if possible, upload them into their Google Drive folder, because this is available on Mac and PC as well, just like the regular Google Drive. And then I just have a folder that says lesson tracks. I tap on that, and then if you hit these, if you drop your phone and you hit these 3 dots to the right, you can actually download those so they live on your phone and there's no downloading needed. It's not going to eat into your students' precious Wi-Fi, which they need. There's a little option that says offline access. And so then once you tap on this, it'll play. It's not going to automatically play the next track until you go in and manually do that. And that is something that's just really useful for students trying to rush to grab start buttons or hit the stop button when they're presenting, you know, like in a class format. You've got a master class or a group class, and it's all of the time that we waste waiting for you to find the track, for the track to download. I'm in the wrong part of the track. Put it into an app like Google Drive. Everybody knows this now. We've been in Zoom for a million years. I always recommend my students too, while they're waiting, to do a sound check. We won't hear it. You just go into your mic settings, literally sing a part of the song, maybe the loudest part of your song. And then when you hit stop, it's going to play your voice back to you. And this actually solves a lot of the, can you hear me? Or it's too loud and you're rattling the speakers on my Mac. So I always recommend group classes, master classes, do your own sound check before you even start. So now we're to track customization. Here's the things that I always think about helping my students being able to adjust. Transpositions, exactly right. We're right on track, Emery. Changing the key, changing the tempo, changing the cut of this track, especially for musical theater performers. It's very important to be able to have a 16-bar, 32-bar cut, or a 45-second, minute and a half cut. Creating fade-ins, fade-outs, and creating a feeling of rubato, so you actually get to take your breaths. So to do that, we need to upload our track into what people call a DAW, a DAW, a digital audio workstation. And you probably already have at least one of these on your computer or your device already. Bandlab is the one that I recommend for my PC users who don't want to spring to get some of these more expensive versions. But a lot of these are platform agnostic. And if you want to take the time to learn Ableton Live or learn Pro Tools, go right ahead. Bandlab is free and you can start using it right away to do transpositions, cuts, fade-ins, all the things we're talking about. I'm going to start in GarageBand because I've got GarageBand up right now. And then we'll show you quickly the Bandlab version, how to do all of these things. Give me 1 second. Nice. Okay, so I'm now sharing my GarageBand screen. And this is going to, if I can get the sound to work, yeah, great. So I just started an empty project. It presents me with a lot of options. I like to always click on the USB MIDI keyboard. This will sometimes cause me some problems if I have my microphone on and I don't have headphones in, and then we get all sorts of feedback, which is terrifying to me. So I'll always start with a USB MIDI keyboard. And it creates a little MIDI. If you're a MIDI user already, you know exactly what this is. We'll talk about this quickly. But now what I do is I take those files we downloaded from before. I've got Stranger. This is the instrumental. You literally just find it and drop it right into the track. You can see it looks very similar to what we saw on the website. We've got the piano part here. We've got the vocal part here. And since I have them both in my track, I know where I am in the song. That's the other thing I find is my students get karaoke versions of songs, or they do this thing, they don't get the vocals and they don't have measure numbers to go off of. Now they can easily just click the mute button over here. And they can say like, oh great, I know exactly where I am. So it's exactly what I'm expecting. I can use my pinch to zoom in and out. So now I can see the entire song. I could turn Kate's voice on and off if I wanted to, but for the most part, if my student's singing the entire song, I'll just like play it start to finish. What if they're really struggling with the low notes? I know that this song goes a little low. can we temporarily change the key on this track so they can play around with what happens if it's maybe just a half step, 2 steps higher, 2 half steps higher. Here's how you do that. You click on the track itself. Up on the top left, we've got the editing button, which is the scissors here. And now it brings us some options to change this. And you can even see down here on my left side, I've got a little follow tempo and pitch button. This one looks like magic. Click on that, analyzes and transients. We're not going to deal with that today. And you literally just take this slider and you drag it up. Let's take a listen to it in the new key. You can go pretty far up or down with this and it still sounds okay on a piano. Other instruments sound weird, voices start sounding weird very quickly, but you can play around with that too, it's fun. It starts to get a little tinny. If we go too far, it's gonna sound terrible. Listen to it up an octave. Now it's some weird like harpsichord celeste hybrid. So this is the easiest way, and sometimes I'll even do this if I'm live in studio. I'll be like, great, I don't want to play that. Let me just drag it up or down half step, sing that section again. Oh, now I can totally hear a way that we can approach this to make this easier for you vocally. Now that we've done follow tempo and pitch, let's bring it back down to a sensible tempo, sensible pitch. Let's change the tempo on it. Let's say that this intro is a little too ponderous for my singer, that they're having issues with it. I go up to my view track and I say show tempo track. This is my track window at the top. And now this is just automatically arbitrarily set at 120. This has no relationship to the actual tempo that is being played. You could go in and change the tempo of it before you upload it. I usually don't worry about it. I just use 120 to say, I'm gonna go faster than bass line. I'm gonna go slower than bass line. So let's say I want the intro to be faster. This is a little automation line. So anywhere on this line I can click and it will give me what they call a node. And now if I click a second node, I can drag portions of this up and down. Let's say I want it to start like quite a bit faster and then slow down to tempo. You can see how these other little nodes, the empty ones, can be smoothed out, and the solid ones here will just move up and down an entire section. So let's listen to it now with a brisker introduction that starting kind of around when the vocal comes in, it'll smooth back to tempo. Okay, so it's really quite fast. But this is a great way that I encourage my students to give themselves breaths as well. To be able to say, oh, you know what, actually, I want just a little bit more time here. One thing that I forgot to do, and this is gonna throw you off as well, I forgot to change Kate Baldwin's vocals to match follow tempo and pitch. So I'm gonna do that as well, because now she's going to change tempo with us. Let's say that I need more of a breath here between to be a stranger.
When you're a stranger in a strange
She didn't transpose up with the track, so it sounds terrible.
new place.
Let's say I want just a little bit more of a lift between place and you learn how much you never knew. I'm just gonna create 2 nodes and I'm gonna drag that little section down, I don't know, just a sensible amount, and listen to it.
In a strange new place. You learn.
Easiest way ever to create little rubatos, little accelerandos. This will save your life when you cannot catch your breath in the middle of a tricky passage. And then it also really helps, as a teacher, it helps my students understand like, oh, I don't have the same phrasing as the performer who's on this, or my accompanist didn't realize based on what the music said, where I'm gonna have issues with phrasing. So it just gives you more control over what's happening. If I wanted to do a cut, let's quickly just do that. I'm gonna find a repeated phrase just as quickly as possible. So let's say,
When I'm a stranger.
let's say I want to go right to the end of the song, but I like the introduction. So I want to hear this entire introduction. So right here is the downbeat of that introduction. You can even see in the waveform, there's a little kind of bump where that piano hits the downbeat. I'm going to let's select both tracks because this will make it easier for us. I'm going to do a 2-finger click or a right click, and I'm going to hit split at playhead. Now we've got a little slice in our tape. Let's find that exact same phrase near the end. This is like the last 32 bars.
You disguise.
Oh, it's it's later than that. Where did it go? Oh, drama. Oh, it's much later. That's why. Give me 1 second. I'll find it. I think it might be here. When? Yeah, when you're a stranger is this phrase. I should have marked it first. Okay, so I'm going to make these match up. Let me show you how I do it. So here's what that piano downbeat happens. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Select both tracks. When this lights up, you know they're selected. Split a playhead. I'm going to zoom out so I can see everything. I'm going to delete both of these. And then I'm just going to take these and I'm going to slide them so they match up with the first one. I'm going to zoom in and just take a look at it and see if it looks wonky. Let's mute Kate and see if this works for us. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. If you want to get better with it, you actually use the little handles that you see on the left and right, and you can kind of scooch. Maybe I want a little bit more of this track, a little less of this track. Maybe I need a little bit more space. You can move them in and out and really kind of micromanage these cuts to the point where if you were singing along with this and I'm your voice, I won't even notice that it's happened. Yeah, I mean, there's a little octave jump in the piano. I would never even notice that. So that's the quickest way to do the three things that we're talking about. Follow tempo and pitch. This would be then also where you can change the key, you can change our tempo line, and then by creating slices in the tracks. Just one thing to remember, this is what we call non-destructive linear editing, which is just a fancy term that means whenever I create a cut or I delete something, it actually doesn't destroy anything. This was new in the realm of computer. It's just because originally, if you cut a tape, that part fell on the floor, and if it went in the garbage, it was gone forever. This, smartly, computers are so smart, love them. The entire track is still hidden right here. Nothing actually went away, which is why sometimes people get that spinning wheel of death that they hate when they're using programs like this, because it's actually creating kind of a duplicate of that track, so you can really go back in and bring things back to life. As long as you don't delete the entire track, and your computer will warn you, it still lives there and you can just do whatever you want with it. Okay, so that was kind of the really quick version of GarageBand. Do I have any specific GarageBand user questions that we can kind of dig into something where I went too quickly? We'll have this as a recording too, so recommend also just Googling. I try to do it from the point of view as you see from a voice teacher or a singer, and a lot of people who do their YouTube presentations from the point of view of a technician or a worship leader or some other thing that we might not be doing on a daily basis. Any questions? Any hands to raise? Anybody love GarageBand and use it all the time already? I'm gonna keep moving then. Let's keep plowing right along. Let me just quickly bring up Bandlab. It works very similarly to GarageBand, completely free, platform agnostic, and it works in your browser. So those of you who do not have a ton of space on your hard drive, this is a great option. You just do have to use Chrome for this. So I'm going to switch over to my Google Chrome. I'm usually a Safari guy. Once again, talked about how I do too much Mac stuff. But anybody can use Bandlab. I even have a shortcut for it right here. You hit create. And then you can, this is great because it will tell you, oh, actually, do you want to start with something that you already have? You say, sure, I've got an audio that I want to do. We'll save that for later. Let's look at my downloads. There we go. Where my stranger files go. I'm just gonna drag them in because I don't know why they're not there. Do the exact same thing. We drag them, it appears. Actually, this is gonna need to go here. So let me do that. Let me change that.
Hi everyone, looks like we lost Warren for a second, so I'm going to pause and reach out to him to see if we had a little technical issue, and so just hang tight. Oh, there he is! Warren's back! You're back!
My computer was like, no thanks.
I thought you just wanted to see how I would tap dance on a webinar live without you.
Yeah.
Warren and I were talking before we started, and I am a novice at this. I'm learning along with everyone else, and so if it had been left to me to teach and talk about this stuff, I would have been not an effective helper. So glad you're back, Warren.
Absolutely. I think it was very unhappy that I had both Bandlab and GarageBand and my keynote presentation open. So I think we're probably good. Let me just try and drag these back in so we can do that demo. Yes, great, that's working. I'll share my screen. Chrome, share sound, enter. Great. So now we have our track. I'm not going to put Kate Baldwin's vocals in, and that might be her vocals. Let me grab the instrumental so we can just do the comparison. Great. So it looks very similar, as you can see, to GarageBand. There are a few big issues that Bandlab has. One is that it cannot change tempo in the middle of a song. They just haven't built that functionality for it. So we have some other workarounds that are very easy, and in fact, in some of the ways I like them better than what happens here. Let's hit play, just make sure we got what we think we got. It sounds weird to hear the song in the original key now. Let's mute Kate Baldwin, that's the M button here. S means solo. I could have alternately soloed the accompaniment track, but let's just mute Kate. I think that's easier to do. And let's say I want to do that same thing with my intro being a little bit slower. The way that Bandlab will change tempo and key is by separating out the part you want to change into its own slice. So I'm going to do that exact same thing with a 2-finger click, a right-click option click, and hit slice. It'll slice the playhead. I'm going to pull this to the right just so I can see what's going on. And then I'm going to do a 2-finger click again, and we have these cool things down here, audio stretch, where you can change the speed kind of like you would change on a YouTube video or a podcast. And you can really go in and get granular by clicking more. And let's say I want it to be slower, I want more time at my introduction. So it's going to be at 80% of the speed. And this is also where you would change the pitch if you chose to. You could easily take it up or down. Actually, let's go ahead and take it up a semitone. Let's apply it. This is all happening in the cloud. So this processing is not something that my computer is doing. It's actually sending it to the Bandlab servers, which can take a little bit of time. As you see, I'm kind of stalling right now while I'm waiting. Oh, there we go. We saw that section get longer. So now, if I bring this back together, you'll hear this is up a half step. So we don't lose our minds. Let's actually raise this to semitone as well. So now these are both raised to semitone. Kate Baldwin is muted, and we're going to hear the new version of this track. So if I needed a breath, instead of doing it on tempo line, because the tempo line doesn't exist, what I do is I actually go in and I slice out the part that I want to be faster or slower. If I wanted to do the cut, it would be exactly the same way that we just saw. You find the section of the song, you put the cut wherever you want the new section to be. The slice, I'm sorry, where you want the new section to be, you delete the center part, you smush them together, and you have magic. That's going to sound terrible because I didn't check it. I just did that arbitrary. One thing that I didn't show you on GarageBand, and sometimes you can't get a cut to work. Sometimes you're like, I just need this section to go into this section, and my pianist will know how to do it, but this track does not know how to do it. There's a couple different ways you can do it. This cut's going to sound bad, so let's listen to it. I don't know why I'd ever go to that section of the song, but let's say that I want to. Let's create a new track, and we do that by hitting add track. And I want this to be, this is a voice mic track. Now we have a blank track here. I can scoot this onto its own track. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to choose to activate this button here. This button is called the Automator, and it creates these lines very similar to what we saw with our tempo. So this is now set to volume. I can create an automated volume fade by double-clicking on this line and dragging all the way down to -infinity decibels, which I think is just a wonderful thing that you can be -infinity decibels. And then let's say I want this track to crossfade. I think it's figuring out its life right now. Let me go back to this. Let's turn this on and off. This track to crossfade. Oh, I need to do it this way. Turn off the automator. I'm going to slide it back just a little bit. I'm going to turn the automator back on. Double click. Bring this from -infinity up to 0 decibels, which means it has no change. It's not making it louder or softer. It's making it exactly the same as the track you imported. Let's hit play. This might be slightly better. If I needed to make that cut, hopefully I would have chosen a section of the song on purpose, but you can see how you can easily splice between things. Or let's say you don't know how to do an ending of your song. Just create a fade out. Just bring it down to negative, and then the song will fade, the track will fade out where you want it to fade out. So even when people have purchased, you know, beautiful, pristine tracks, I always encourage my students to use techniques like this so that they have exactly what they want, that they can recreate that experience of the accompanist, knowing them and having rehearsed with them. Because it's just happens so often that we're just not able to get what we need. Bandlab, GarageBand. There are any other DAW programs will be able to do these basic things. They might have more limitations. You might have to jump through hoops. I find that Bandlab and GarageBand are the most user-friendly, so that's why I start with them. If you use another program, if you use Logic, if you use Ableton, just Google how to do that in each of your programs. That's the easiest way I can say to get through that. Any other questions about creating tracks and modifying tracks for you specifically to use in the privacy of your own home? People are typing things in the chat, so feel free to raise your hand or type your question in the chat.
We have, I think Elizabeth had their hand up, if I saw that correctly.
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
That was an accident.
Elizabeth, is it a question you want to chat with them? Oh, would you? Okay, this is that Play Score subscription. Would I suggest that you get a membership to Play Score? I suggest a membership to Play Score if you are able to do the things that I'm going to show you next with it. Play Score is, I believe it's like $10 a month. It's pretty pricey, so I generally don't recommend it if you just need accompaniments. It probably would, depending on how you use it. But if you are a Finale user, or if you use MIDI a lot for your arrangements you're playing, it might be useful. I'll show you really quickly how I would do that. Which is more user-friendly for beginners. Both of them are great. If you have a Mac already or use an iPhone, I would probably recommend just starting with GarageBand. There's a lot of pros to it, and it seems to run more reliably. If you do not have those devices and don't care to use them, or you want something, actually the Bandlab app on the phone is pretty robust. It works pretty well, and there's some features that GarageBand does not have. So if you don't have a Mac, absolutely, I would start with Bandlab if you haven't used anything before. If you're a Mac user, probably would use GarageBand. I think you'll just find it. Any other questions about that? Great questions.
And Warren, I'm just going to be the bad person to remind you that we're already almost at 8:50 Eastern time, which is awful because I'm learning so much already. But just want to make sure that we are getting through. So that does not mean, attendees, please jump in, shoot your questions in the chat, or raise your hand. I can unmute you if you'd like to ask your question to Warren directly, or you can put it in the chat. But so don't let the time stop you from asking your questions. We're just gonna. I would learn from Warren until all of you were ready to leave and be very happy. So
I'm gonna move on from accompaniment tracks for now, so that I can show you a little bit of the techniques that I use to record vocals using these programs, because I know that was like the second most popular topic that I was going to cover tonight. So let me kind of like blaze through that really quickly, answer some questions that you put into those things, and just, you know, if we have some time at the end, I'm glad to answer some more questions about it. So let me go back into my GarageBand, and we'll talk just a little bit about MIDI when I go into GarageBand, because this, I think, is a good time to bring it up. So MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. I believe I got that right. And it is a language that was created, I think, in the 1960s, 1970s to help computers talk to musical instruments. And if you have a keyboard, an electric keyboard in your studio, your house, there's a really good chance, it's probably like a 99% chance that it has MIDI connectivity built into it. So if you play the piano and you have not been playing your tracks into or utilizing the features of MIDI, I would highly recommend figuring out what kind of connector you need. Most people, it's just the same. It's a USB 2, I believe it's called. It looks like a printer USB connection. It's kind of like square with little beveled edges on the top. If you grab one of those, I just plug my keyboard directly into my Mac. It recognizes it right away. Bandlab will recognize it right away through any computer running Chrome. It's fantastic. So what I did in this particular case, yes, I think this will be available for share. We can talk with Errik about that.
Yeah, as Warren's pulling up his next example, yes, we will. This recording will be posted. It'll be archived and posted for people to access. So yes, thank you. We're going for a little while longer, so I hope you can stay with us live. But if not, yes, please reference this recording in the future.
Okay, so everyone should be able to see my GarageBand now again. I'm going to choose that USB MIDI keyboard. And then, because this is plugged into my keyboard, which I use to teach, it's actually going to play the instrument sound that you see here. I like to think of it if an MP3 file, an audio file, is like a PDF, which I can kind of make some cuts to. A MIDI file is like a Word document, a word processing document. You can actually go in on a granular level and change individual notes, individual phrases. So if I were to just hit record on this, just kind of made that up. This is actually showing the individual notes that I played, for how long I played them, where I made mistakes, and how loudly I played them. So let's say I made a mistake there. I don't want that note to be there. I click on it, and I just literally hit the delete key, and it's gone. No more mistakes. So if your accompanist are playing things as MIDI files, and you're a GarageBand user, I would ask them, hey, would you mind sending me a MIDI file of that track that you played for me instead? Can you send it to me directly as that so I can import it into GarageBand, and then you'll be able to make those adjustments on a much more granular level. If I change, let's change this to my, I do like the Steinway sound here. Let's listen to my Steinway sound of this. If I transpose these notes now, it's going to play them the way a Steinway would actually play those notes and not pitch bend them like our other one was. Let's actually put this all the way up here. So now everything sounds exactly the same as the way it was sampled. So you can use PlayScore to create MIDI files directly from sheet music. If I needed a MIDI file of a stranger, I can go back into my PlayScore. So I've got stranger here. I'm going to click the share button at the top. And now it gives me options: save as MIDI, save as music XML, which is really useful as well if you use Finale. I'm going to save it as a MIDI file. And now it says, great, what do you want to do with it? I'm like, okay, I want to send it to my computer. I'm going to send it right to my MacBook Pro. And then I can open this directly from my downloads, and it's going to have created a MIDI file based on what it read from a stranger. Here, let me show you how magical I thought this was when I first used it. So I have this now in my downloads. I'm literally just dragging the MIDI file into the score. It's going to ask, do I want to import tempo? This is going to use the tempo that I set for it. Let's see what it looks like. So now I could use this instead of that awful vocal remover track that I ripped. And you can do the exact same things that we're talking about. We can change what I like to do to change the transposition on this is slightly different. I like to, instead of changing transposition here, which I find gets weird, just no sidebar, I click in this bar, hit Command A to select all notes, and then I just choose, I know that this is in the key of A. Let's say I want to do it in B flat. I literally just drag it up. It'll tell you what note you're dragging to. I find that easier. That's just me. Do the exact same things with cuts. I can show my tempo track, exactly what I was using before. So that is one of the benefits of using PlayScore, is that it creates MIDI files really easily. If you're a Finale user, you know that Finale can also read MIDI files. So let's say I needed sheet music for this transposition. You could dump this into Finale, turn it into a readable piano score, and then you can start doing your own transpositions for things that need to be played by a live human being and not a robot. All right, so let's get into vocal recording, because I created kind of a little demo. Ooh, this is a good question from Ariana that we'll get to when I get there, because I have thoughts about it, and Errik, I'm sure does too, so I'm curious to hear what he thinks. Let me go into something that I pre-recorded for you. One second. Open recent SNATS demo. Okay, so I used a MIDI file of this cut of More Than a Feeling, the Boston song that I was working on for one of my students. And I'll show you kind of the 3 different ways that I recorded vocals into this. Here, as you can see, is the MIDI track. Let me just mute my vocals so I don't give away the surprise. Oof. So this is just the accompaniment that I played in myself. I just used my keyboard to play it in from sheet music. I used, for take pass 1 of this, my Rode Nt1 microphone. So this puppy right here is kind of an entry level recording studio style microphone. I have this just on a podcasting mic stand. it comes with this, I'll send you the links to all the gear that I use. It comes with this spider mount cage. So if you jostle the microphone, it doesn't translate into kind of a more sensitive microphone. And it came with this XLR cable. So the XLR cable, we'll talk briefly about microphones. Those of you who have microphones, there's probably a good chance that you're using a USB microphone. What I'm talking to you on right now is the Samsung Go. And this is just a tiny little $50 microphone that has a regular little USB plug that goes right into my computer and recognizes it right away. If you're dealing with an XLR microphone, you may know this, you're gonna need to get this signal into your computer. There's no XLR plug on my computer, which is probably a good thing. So you buy one of these little boxes. This USB interface, this one I believe costs maybe like $110 currently. And you just plug the XLR into it, and then you'll see it's got that same printer cable USB. This goes now directly into your computer. And this acts as translating the signal from what would normally be kind of a stage or a studio recording microphone, that your computer can read it and understand it so you can use it with your interface. If you have questions specifically about the kind of microphones that you have, I'm glad to field those. I find my blanket answer is, if you're just starting out and you want a better microphone than is on your phone or your computer currently, get a little USB microphone. People love the Blue Yeti. I think they're fine. If you find yourself doing demo recordings or you really want to up your game, I'll show you in a minute how the different qualities are. Then maybe it's time to go to sweetwatersound.com and just check in for like, hey, what's in my budget? Let's look at some reviews of these. I like the Nt1 a lot, but there's tons of fantastic microphones and they all work differently for different people's voices. It's kind of beyond the scope of this discussion. Just know, if you're sending these into your computer, either way, we can get a good sound from them. If you're sending the audio that you record on your phone into your computer, we can still get like a decent sound from it. So let me show you what I did. I actually just hooked this directly in to my GarageBand, made sure it was recognizing my Rode NT1. I sang a little test spot because I know that this song gets loud, and you can even see in the waveform here, oh, I'm singing at probably double the volume as I am at the beginning. So I sang the loudest part of the song, made sure I wasn't clipping. By clipping, you'll see either on your box, maybe this will work if I yell into it right now. Hey, 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 hey. The red means that it's going to distort the sound and will make it impossible to clean up. If I've gone into the red on any takes, and you see, here, I wonder if I can record this. It might get mad at me. I'll show you. Duplicate, what we call clipping. Let's make a new one here. This, I don't want to listen to it. I'll just do a little quick recording. Hey! Did that work? No, it didn't work. You know what's going on is Zoom hates this. This is why I do everything in advance. But just, I'll show you what a waveform looks like when it's clipped, because I'm going to have another one that's clipped. But I did enjoy those riffs that I made up. I wish I had recorded those. Let's listen to what it sounded like when I recorded my vocals, and you'll see the distance that I recorded them at. In just a second, I'm going to unmute this. This has no processing. This is just the raw vocals coming directly from the Rode NT. I woke up this morning and the sun was gone. Turned on some music to start my day. I lost myself in a familiar song. I close my eyes, then I drift away. So it sounds kind of flat and tinny, but the signal is really clear. If I mute the accompaniment, it's fairly quiet, and I live on 82nd Street. I woke up. There's a little bit of background noise, a little bit of hum, but it's actually pretty clean. It's going to be a little different than you would get from a microphone like this, which actually picks up kind of a lot of background noise. Part of it is the design of the mic, part of it's just a high quality microphone. So I could now start playing around with mixing, but before we do that, let me show you two other versions of this. I recorded them simultaneously, one through the webcam, just my regular camera on my Mac, and one through my phone. I'll drop them both in and we'll take a look. So if you do not have this kind of microphone, all you have is your phone, great. take your phone audio and drop it right into GarageBand. Here's the video of me looking really serious. Let me close that. I can't bear to look at that. And now you can see it's got the running movie above, and it's got the vocal that I recorded on my phone. Let's see if there's any clipping. No clipping on this one. Now the thing is, it's not lined up. I'm gonna have to find how to line this up. So I can just use my ears to figure out, like, I know that I sing on the pickup to the third measure. So this is probably I woke up this morning. So just for the sake of comparison, I'm gonna move both of these so that the pickup of the third measure is that. I think it's probably here. I'm gonna have to maybe just give it a check. Those of you who have lined up vocals with audio tracks know that this can get a little fussy. Let's listen to it, see what happened.
I woke up this morning.
Yeah, so not quite too early. So we just drag everything to the left until it lines up. Oh no, I lied. It should be right here. That should be the downbeat. Let's listen to it.
Woke up this morning.
Nope, too soon.
I woke up this morning and the sun was gone. Turned on some music to start my day.
It's not terrible, and this is just my iPhone. Let me show you what my web camera sounds like, just so we have that as a comparison. You know, I'm gonna save that for later since I wanna get through some of this other stuff. So just know that I recorded this video literally just using my iPhone. Let's add some mixing to it, because this is really where this program starts to shine. I'm gonna go to the original vocals first, since this is a little bit better. We're gonna add just a few tips and tricks from my tray over here. If you don't see your tray on the left, if you're using Bandlab, it appears on the bottom left, and this will be vocal effects. I'm just gonna take a look at whatever I know that I like the way my voice sounds when I use natural vocal. And you can just kind of click through these. This is a classic rock song, so let's click on classic vocal and see what it does. Automatically, it puts up a bunch of different knobs. I'm not gonna worry about these right now. I'm gonna say, do I like the way this sounds now?
I woke up this morning and the sun was gone. Turned on some music to start my day.
It's got a cool kind of arena rock sound to it. Why? Because it's added a little bit of echo. So the more you start playing around with these things, the more you'll realize what the signifiers are of these different sounds that we hear. Compression, for those of you who don't know, actually takes the louds and the softs and using computer technology, compresses them so they're in a much narrower range of dynamics. I know that I'm gonna sing very quietly and then very loud, and I like the sound of a compressed voice in a rock song, so I'm gonna crank this baby up. Let's hit play on it.
I lost myself in a familiar song. I closed my eyes, then I...
So you see what happens when these lights turn blue? That means it's taken my way too loud vocals and it's compressing them to match the same volume as my lower volume, And this creates kind of a roboty sound. Whenever you hear someone who doesn't sound quite natural on a processed recording, it's probably because they put some compression on it. So if you want to create the sound of a live recording, like we saw in the chat, I would not put any compression whatsoever on the voice. I want to hear what you sound like acoustically in the room. If you sing pop styles of music, and in fact, the auditions right now for American Idol do not specify that it needs to be a raw, unedited voice. They actually say it's okay to have a little bit of reverb, a little bit of compression. If that's how you're going to end up sounding on the TV show, play around with throwing a little compression on your video that you send to them. I have other thoughts about changing tuning, changing pitch, but these effects are being used by commercial artists, and if I know how to use them when I'm singing in a commercial style, it makes it easier for me to know what I'm doing vocally and really meter that. So compression, really useful. EQ, you probably know EQ based on changing the mids and the highs and the lows in your car stereo. Let's just play around with it so you can hear what it sounds like. I'm gonna go back to, I like the natural vocal better. I'm just gonna play that here. Let's add that compression back because I like it. Let's listen to this part again.
Song. I close my eyes, then I drift away.
So I put a lot of brightness into that sound because, you know, I hadn't really warmed up. So I'm gonna pull down the brightness by pulling down the highs. What happens if I bump the lows maybe a little bit? Let's see how that phrase sounds different.
I close my eyes, then I...
So it's a little bit more balanced. Let's say I'm gonna bring up the mids a little bit. I don't know, give it a try.
I close my eyes.
What happens if I take out all the highs and I bump up the lows?
I close my eyes, then I drift away.
Now it starts to sound unnatural. But I generally, when I'm playing around with GarageBand, I just play with the lows, mids, and highs. If you have a hum in your room, which I think I saw somebody said that there's like a high-pitched hum or a fan, you can actually click the EQ button, find where that hum is, and you can remove it by pulling it out of the sound. It's a little bit more advanced. You want to look at that on a tutorial, but I can do it like this. You take the Q level and turn it up really high. Let's say I know that that hum is like right at 6,000 hertz. You could literally pull out that sound. So EQ is something that maybe you would use sparingly in a home recording studio to balance the effects of the limitations of having a room that maybe is a little too loud, or having a microphone that feels a little too tinny for you. Maybe you want it to be a little warmer. You'd bring up the mids. There are a couple of other things here that we'll just take a look at quickly when you're talking about audio editing. Let me go back to the controls. Reverb. Everybody knows what reverb is. We all love it, and more is better, right? Let's listen to it with too much.
Familiar song. I close my eyes, then I drift.
So reverb literally means the sound of your voice hanging in the air in thousands of different ways, bouncing off of every surface in a simulated room. And that's what computers are able to do. It's different than echo. Listen to what happens when I turn the echo on.
Drift away.
Can't hear it there. Let me go back.
Lost myself in a familiar song.
It actually sends the sound back to me exactly as I hear it intact. As opposed to letting the voice hang in the air, it creates the impression of distance, as opposed to creating the impression of being in a room. And this is what we saw that this classic vocal did to my vocals. Just a little bit of echo and a little bit of reverb makes it sound like you're in a stadium. Listen to that again.
I lost myself in a familiar song.
Just a tiny bit of that sound. I could do the exact same thing to my iPhone vocals. Let's do that really quickly, and you can just see how these vocals compare now. I'm just gonna go to voice, natural vocal. I'm gonna crank up that compression and the reverb. Do the exact same thing I did before.
I woke up this morning and the sun's gone. Turned on some music to start my day. I lost myself in a familiar song. I closed my eyes.
It's not as good of a microphone. Would I want to submit this to a recording studio to show off like how great my vocals were? No. If I was using my phone to record a callback for a Broadway audition and I needed it tomorrow, yeah, and I probably wouldn't put any effects on it. I probably would just leave it completely dry. The secret to this, my friends, and if you have questions about this, I'm going to take a peek in the chat in just a second, is record your vocals separately from your accompaniment. If you have to do a recording that you're submitting to be judged on your vocals and the accompaniment is in the room, it's going to sound bad because these technologies are not able to deal with both a piano track being played from a speaker in your room and your voice happening live in the room. So even if you put no editing whatsoever on your voice, highly recommend. Let me show you what I did here. I'm actually wearing these same headphones and I just tuck the cable behind my ear.
I lost myself in a
I can't even tell I'm wearing it. I'm only hearing the track from my headphone. I'm not hearing the track in the room whatsoever. It really makes a big difference. And so all my Broadway clients, I'm like, just get comfortable with singing with one AirPod in, get comfortable with having a wired headphone in, and then just showing them that simple trick of dropping that video directly into GarageBand, lining up the accompaniment, and then you bounce by sharing it as a video without putting any effects on it whatsoever. And we have just a clear idea of how you're gonna sound, the way that my ears would be able to separate your voice from the track if I were in person. Makes a huge difference. Questions about that?
Warren, this might be a good time to reference Ariana's question about
yes.
You're doing that. Yeah.
Hey, Errik, you've had some time to think about that. Do you want to kind of give because you watch a lot more auditions than I do for like college programs. I watch different styles of auditions.
Yeah, we're watching tons of auditions. But what we want to do is we want to get a sense for what your voice sounds like. So I would say my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking on behalf of my university or other universities. My personal opinion is if a few small adjustments make the recording more accurately reflect what your voice sounds like, that seems more than appropriate to me. But when we're trying to use those adjustments to improve your sound or enhance it or to cover up things, that's where I think we start to get into problems. So I would say any small adjustments you make that makes the recording sound more like you, that to me seems perfectly reasonable. But when you're starting to sound less like you, more like an idealized version of you, that's where I think it starts to be an issue. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
Warren,
I think
what do you think?
I think exactly right, and it's different in different situations. Like we said, if you're a contemporary vocalist and I don't hear how you work the microphone, then I don't know how you're going to sound when I hire you to sing lead for my band. But if you are a classical vocalist and you're working a microphone, then I might be a little confused about like, what is this voice going to sound like when I hear it in the setting that I'm going to experience it in? And auditioning for a college program, for sure, we're going to hear you live at some point before we accept you into the program. And we'll know. We'll be able to say like, oh, huh. And in fact, I take notes when I see people's auditions. I was like, oh, I think there's processing on this voice.
Yeah, same.
I think there's processing on this voice, and then I just keep an eye out for it whenever I hear it in person.
I would also say, you know, especially if you're doing contemporary musical theater or contemporary music and you're recording auditions, it's really not a super accurate representation of what the final product would be singing acoustically in a room with a grand piano, because there are all kinds of colors that aren't available to you when you're singing in that acoustic environment. So Ariana, I totally understand your question, but that's the guideline I would use, is that you're trying to make yourself sound more like you, not less like you.
I agree. There's a great question about using a clap at the beginning to line up everything better. A clap at the beginning is used kind of in very specific situations. If I were to send this to iMovie, for example, I would probably want there to be a clap, because then I can reference something visual on my waveform, the audio waveform, and then I can see something also visual in the video to line them up. The technique that I'm showing you right now, we don't need a clap. Let me show you why. Since I just pointed out the fact that I'm cheating and I have a headphone in that you can't see, there is no accompaniment on this track. I'm not going to need to line up video and audio at a later date. So all I have to do is now go up to Movie, export audio to movie. This will now have added accompaniment to a track that did not previously have it. And then this is where you just have to be careful. I have to change this to full quality. It starts, I don't know why it wants it to put it 480p. You're gonna have the tiniest little videos ever. That'll be terrible. And then I'm just gonna send this directly to my desktop. And it saves this as one file once again. That's the beauty of GarageBand. Bandlab will not do that. You would have to drop the audio in from the movie and then recombine them using a video editing software. So if you knew that you weren't going to be able to use this technique, yeah, I probably would clap at the beginning. With this, the clap does me no good. I'm going to line up using my ears to feel that downbeat. The other thing too, and I can talk about this briefly, suggested mic for classical for recorded singers. We'll get to that in a second. If you end up doing a lot of video editing, Adobe Premiere Pro is worth an investment. It's kind of like the industry standard for web content. And it will automatically line up a video with audio with another audio source. You do not need a clap whatsoever. It saves me thousands of hours of trying to figure out where does everything go. You literally just dump it into the program. You say sync to audio. It lines everything up. You can cut back and forth. I actually recorded 2 different versions of this video at the same time. I could cut back and forth between those 2, crossfade between them, add all the kind of professional things that you see people doing when they're recording, you know, from their bedroom, and then they upload it to whatever channel and they become a superstar. So if you do a lot of video editing, I would recommend Premiere Pro to take away the need to sync things with the clap. A suggested mic for classical singer recorded auditions. This is really tricky. And those of you who are classical singers or have dealt with classical vocal recordings know that most of the microphone types that contemporary singers are obsessed with hate dealing with the amount of output, with the amount of stuff that you've trained so hard to get into your voice. This is not going to know how to deal with it. So the things I recommend are distance and pulling down the gain as much as possible, and then finding a room that you already sound pretty good in. If you're recording in a dead room, then the microphone is not going to really like it either. If you have to stand close enough to the mic to make your voice sound clearer, and you're not using the technique that you would use to sing live, then it's going to be really hard to create that element of what it's going to sound like to do a live classical performance. Errik, have you worked with particular microphones for classical singing with your students?
Some, mostly it's we've been working with kind of what everyone has. So I think it's important though, just like you said, to put some distance between yourself and the microphone, and to make sure if you have the option to use like the omnidirectional input. Again, I'm speaking way out of my knowledge base.
That's
but,
exactly right. So what he's talking about is some microphones will have a little switch on them. So this one on the left side is the cardioid pattern. On the right side is a circle, and that means omnidirectional. So I can move this between being directional and omnidirectional. And so that's going to do exactly what we were saying, which is pick up a little bit of the noise of the room, warm the voice up, make it sound a little bit more live. I'm sorry I cut you off, but that's exactly right, omnidirectional.
No, that's all I was trying to say. And that way, when you're singing in a room that you already sound great in, just like Warren just said, you can use more of that when you have the microphone picking up the omnidirectional, and you don't have to try to add artificial reverb to classical singing, because we notice that right away. I feel like when we're adjudicating, and when artificial reverb on a classical sound is usually
what are the
I find
best
it a little jarring sometimes.
locations that you've seen people record it where you're like, oh, have people recorded things in their bathroom and they sound really great? What have you seen?
Sometimes bathrooms. A lot of people will use churches, but even just like large rooms, I think it's just any place where you can put some space between you and the microphone, and where it's not like walls, ceiling, and floor carpeted, where it's sucking up all of that acoustic space. It's a little different, Warren. It seems to me, this is something I'd love your opinion about, but it seems to me we want a little of that natural reverb when we're recording a more classical style, but we're trying to get as much of that out of the sound as possible when we're doing a more contemporary sound.
That is exactly right. We want the driest, most boring sounding vocal possible, because we know that it's so important to add that, because it's just the style of adding it after the fact. Because I'm doing different things with my voice, that because I'm doing it at a low volume, that I would not be able to if I had to sing loudly. Like the growls and the scoops that I was putting in for More Than a Feeling, I would never try and fill a hall acoustically with that, because that is going to be dangerous. But I'm using the microphone as an extension of my voice. It's kind of it takes a little bit of time getting used to, especially when you only took classical lessons growing up like I did. I was like, oh wait, the mic's my friend. But it just requires kind of rethinking resonance in those situations.
One thing I think is,
go ahead.
Sorry, when I was just going to say, one thing that's important later on, if you're watching this, future voice teachers, share this information with your students also, because it helps them realize that the sound that they hear in their headphones is not the sound they should expect to hear come out of their mouth in the practice room. When they see what's all involved in mixing the sound, all the processes that are involved, they realize that they're not going to be able to make that sound directly from their mouth. And I think that's a big challenge I have as a teacher, is students think that this engineered sound is what's going to come out of their mouth once they've trained properly, once they're finished, and in actuality, there's all these processes that professional singers at the highest level are still utilizing, and that we can't expect our students to do that acoustically, even though they think that that's the sound that will come out. So
Sure.
This also helps as a teaching tool. I just thought of that while we were chatting.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing that came up as a question. How do I know what is the issue that my students are having with their Zoom equipment, and what's a technical issue that's happening? And it's really hard to tell, because people have slow internets, they're singing in rooms that are dead or too live, or their microphones are wonky. And in that case, I always recommend you have your students set up their iPhone, their other phone on a tripod, record them while they're singing for you the last kind of pass through the rep, because whatever's happening here is going to mitigate some of the effects of the Zoom delay. It's going to mitigate some of the things that I might be hearing, where we've all experienced this, where the pitch will change or the tempo will speed up or slow down over Zoom. I'm like, I know that my student is not singing that quickly. And then have them immediately email this or drop that file to you, so you can both kind of review it together and say like, oh, that's the voice that I'm expecting. That's the one that I hear when we sing live together. Or, well, you know what? I actually didn't notice. I thought you were singing on pitch, and now I can tell you're quite sharp. So any other additional tool you can use, and a phone video recording will be pretty reliable. It's not going to be dealing with the issue of compression, with the issues of not being in the room with the person.
And what a great excuse to get your students to start utilizing that augmented feedback tool of
Yes.
audio recording their practice. It's a great way to sneakily get them to start doing that, because that augmented feedback is invaluable in their practice.
let's take a look at some of the other questions that people have put into the questionnaire. I'm going to bring that up really quickly. And if you have other things and you want to drop them in the chat or raise hands, if anybody really feels like they want to show off their setup, which I love seeing people's equipment or trying to help them position things, I'm going to look really quickly.
Yeah, we've got as Warren's looking, we've probably got about 10 minutes we should probably utilize. We should probably keep it under 90 minutes or so. So this is the time where if you put in the Google form that you'd like to address a question on Zoom, we can promote you to a panelist. You can turn your video on, or I can just unmute you and you can participate only through the microphone as an attendee, or you can type your questions into the chat. So lots of ways for us to answer your questions, to talk about obstacles you might be facing in your home studio setup.
There was a question from Marissa who indicated she might want to chat as a presenter, that she uses Ableton Live and is having issues with breath sounds and with static or a lack of crispness. Marissa, are you still in the room with us today?
I think Marissa's in the room. I don't know if she's...
Us?
Oh, she's here, yeah.
Yeah, great.
So Marissa, shall we, let's promote Marissa. And Marissa, are you okay to go camera on and join us? We're about to find out because I'm about to promote you. Yes. Okay, great.
Great. While we're getting her into the room, let me look at a couple other questions that maybe popped in. Oh, Marissa. Hi, welcome. You're muted. There you go.
I'm just gonna plug my headphones in because I think that'll be easier to hear me.
It's so nice to meet you. Are you singer, voice teacher, both, neither?
I'm a singer, and I hope that's better quality of audio. I'm not currently in my audio recording space because there's better Wi-Fi here. But mostly my questions are like, I tend to use Ableton Live to record audio because I've tried other formats of recording audio and I just prefer Ableton Live.
Sure.
However, I'm stuck between whether or not I should keep in breath sounds or take them out. I find in contemporary that oftentimes you can hear the breath sounds, but I'm not really sure. Like a lot of people say it sounds unprofessional and I just don't know where to land on that. And I struggle with Ableton's software, but maybe I just need to Google a little harder.
I will tell you what to look for if you want to automate taking out breath sounds. And this is going to be an artistic choice. If you're singing contemporary music and you like the way the breath sounds, keep it in.
Okay.
If you think it is distracting or if for whatever reason it sticks out to you, I generally will keep breaths in quietly. And the way that I do that is using what we call a gate or a noise gate.
Okay.
And this is a computerized program that automates how loud sounds have to be before they're let in through the gate. So if you set your noise gate to fairly low, quieter than you're ever singing, it will either remove the breath sounds completely or kind of bring them down. Let me show you really quickly how that works in GarageBand. And you can really easily find a noise gate tutorial on Ableton Live too. You just really add the plugin. Oh, those are people's questions. Give me 1 second while I bring it up. Share screen, GarageBand, share. So in GarageBand, you add plugins down here. See where it says plugins?
Yep.
And I'm going to click on, let's change this to noise gate. And now you can see this window, right?
Yep.
The threshold means that this is going to it'll only let in sounds that are louder than 50 decibels below the sound I'm saying. So if I bring the noise gate up and you can see this slider moving too, it's going to actually reduce. Let's actually play with this so you can hear what it does.
This morning and the sun's gone.
I'm cutting out when I get quiet now. Did you hear that? Listen to it.
Yeah, okay.
Because the noise gate is too high. It's removing what I want my vocals to be.
This morning and the sun's gone.
So I'll lower this until I can hear all of my vocal.
Woke up this morning and the sun's gone.
I didn't take, maybe there are audible breaths. Let's see if I can find an audible breath here where I gasped for air. Maybe this is a gasp.
It's more than...
This is it's small. I wonder if this will take this out as if it were a breath. Let's try it. So I'm going to bring up the gate until the breath kind of disappears.
It's more than...
Let's bring it up even louder.
It's more than...
It's not working. This will be too high.
More than...
So picture that was a breath that was quieter than the consonant I was doing. I didn't have any breaths to show you, unfortunately.
No, that totally makes sense though.
On Ableton as well, their gate plugin will allow you to not remove the breaths completely, but it can choose like, how much do I want those to be quieter? So
Okay,
breaths
cool.
now are still present in your sound, and other noise, that works great for background noise too. Let's say you've got a noisy air conditioner, set a noise gate on it, find the place where your voice comes through and the breaths even, and then everything else just disappears into nothingness.
That's so helpful because like the word gate is not something I would know to look for.
No, the kind of stuff that music technicians, God bless them, they're fantastic. But sometimes I would ask them questions. They're like, "Oh, well, it's really interesting." I'm like, "You didn't answer anything like a singer would want to know that." Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they teach you how to do stuff that's not meant
They're
for
too smart
necessarily
for
us.
me.
Yeah.
They're too smart for
I
me.
agree. Cool, thank you.
One thing I would add just is, especially when we're evaluating our pre-screen recordings, we're getting hundreds of those and we're listening to them. A lot of times, the breath, especially when we're talking about not necessarily pop music, but when it's more like a musical theater song or a classical song where we're telling a story, we're a character, just don't underestimate the dramatic impact that a breath can have. A lot of times it's so communicative, and so I would caution against taking out breaths that are really part of your communication and your storytelling. That can be a huge important part. So don't be afraid to leave those in.
I agree.
That's true.
I agree. It's like hearing the guitar noise on a real guitar. You're like, oh yeah, there's a real person there. It's not just a disembodied computer playing that.
Awesome.
Cool, thank
Marissa,
you so much.
Thanks so much for
thanks
thanks
for joining
for
us.
jumping in. Appreciate it. I'm going to put you back into an attendee role here. Maybe change role to attendee.
Did we have other people that wanted to join us or had specific questions?
We had a question from one of our viewers. I don't want to mispronounce their name. Do you see it in the chat there, Warren?
Yeah, Reese, I believe. Is that how you pronounce your name? What kind of webcam and microphone setup do you suggest for virtual lessons? This is a great question, and talk to 2 voice teachers and you'll get 2 different opinions. Talk to 100 and you'll get a million opinions. So I just use the one that's built into my computer because I know that it works fine. I know it's always going to be plugged. The fewer things I plug into this thing, which already has like spaghetti hanging out from it, that's better. It's better by me. I use this microphone. So, and here's the reason why. Because this gives me a little bit of feedback. I'm hearing my own voice while I'm hearing what's coming through the computer. If you've got a microphone that has an external monitor on it, I would highly recommend, if you're teaching, to plug your headphones into it so that if you are modeling or if you're talking a lot, you can really monitor your own voice use. When I just have headphones plugged into my ears, I start over singing, I over talk, and then by the end of the day, I was really tired. So I switched to this setup so I would really have just a little bit more feedback on what was going on with my own vocal health as a teacher. If you are the singer in lessons, I have had students that, went out and bought microphones like this because they really like them, and we set it up so that Zoom used them. Great. If your webcam, your built-in microphone doesn't cause distortion, then I would say just use that. If you want to spring for one of these cheapies, I'll send you the links on how to get these things because I think it's pretty decent. You can, for $50, you just get a little extra boost of quality. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I think also if you look, Ian Howell at New England Conservatory has done some articles and just kind of breaking down some costs, and so you can find those in NATS resources. Maybe we can put some text pointing into that in the text that accompanies the archival recording. But check that out because he's got some great things to say about price points and what's helpful in lessons. One thing I would say to Warren's point, my biggest thing for me is the headphones. I think most of my students don't really matter. I should say it doesn't really matter to them how clearly they see my face or how clearly they hear my voice. But the biggest thing I think as a teacher to invest in and utilize is high quality headphones. Mine are backless, which is really helpful for me because I can hear myself in the room. I'm a lot less inclined to push and press when I'm talking or demonstrating, so I don't have to take one ear out. So I'm getting really high quality sound from the signal through the computer, but I'm also hearing myself in a more acoustic way, a more acoustically reliable way in the room, so I'm not pushing or that kind of thing. So for me, I'd say that if you're thinking, what should I invest in first? What piece of equipment should I invest in for virtual teaching? My advice would be high quality headphones so you can hear what your student is doing as well as possible. That's the first priority as far as I'm concerned.
Any other questions in the chat? Let me just take a look quickly. We answered a lot of the ones that showed up from the questionnaire, so I'm happy about that.
Well,
I hope this at least, like we were talking about earlier, gives you some ideas about where to get started with some things. I'm available as a resource. My email address is on the NYU website. And I think it's probably on the SNATS page as well. Feel free to email me with follow-up questions about the content that we talked about today. But then also, Google it. Go to experts. I recommend, coming down to microphones, I call Sweetwater Sounds. This is like, hi, here's my budget. Here's what I'm doing. They're like, oh, you know what? You probably want to get like microphones on an XY axis so it can really pick up the sound of the room. Great. I had no idea about that. So phone a friend, call an expert, and just Google it. For that Ableton Live question, I was like, what is Ableton? Oh, it's just called Gate. Okay, fantastic. It's really easy once you at least know that the tools are out there for you.
It's a great lesson for us as voice teachers too. When in doubt, refer out. There are things that we can handle on our own, but don't be afraid of talking to experts. Don't be afraid to reach out to help, because you might get a relatively simple answer that we just, we don't know the answer to, or your colleagues don't. And so ask an expert, get that help, and don't be afraid to lean on those people. So Warren, I think this is actually, it works out well timing wise, because it's probably about the end of our time. I want to thank you again so much for clearing out your schedule and for preparing this presentation, and also walking us through your experiences. I've learned a ton. You probably made a mistake letting me know how knowledgeable you are, knowing that I can bug you at work anytime. I
like talking about this kind of stuff, so as long as I'm free, I'm glad to talk about it. I'm glad to learn some stuff. I even learned new things researching for this presentation today.
I love it. One thing I would say, Aris, thank you, Aris. Thank you for helping us clarify that pronunciation. So one other thing I'd love to say before we wrap up is, please don't hesitate. We want to make these SNATS chats more useful for this specific group of folks. People who are in college, undergraduate and graduate studies, people who are recent graduates of college programs and getting into professional voice teaching for the first time. This is who we want to speak to. These are the people we want to help. So I would love it if you have suggestions for topics or ideas for guests or things you'd like to see covered in these SNATS chats, or any feedback at all. Don't be afraid to email me directly. It's my first name dot last name at nyu.edu. You can find it on the NYU Steinhardt faculty page. You can find it on my personal website, www.erika.com. So just reach out to me and feel free to send ideas, feedback. We want to keep improving these experiences for all of you. So thank you again for attending. Thank you again for your insightful questions, for filling out the Google form in advance so that Warren could spend his time making sure that he was answering the exact questions you had. So one more time, thank you so much, Warren. Thank you to all of you for attending. Thank you to NATS for sponsoring, promoting these chats. So grateful to all of you. Thanks again, Warren.
Thanks, everyone. This is so much fun. Hope to see you around. Send me a message.
All right, and yes, and be on the lookout on NATS social media, on the NATS website, and an email list that goes out to the SNATS chapter presidents and advisors, where you'll find information about our next SNATS chat, the topic, and the dates. So be on the lookout for that so you can get those into your calendar as soon as possible, and hope you join us again. Thanks again, and have a wonderful night. Thanks, Warren. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.